Hey everyone, it's Dr. NightStare. Glad you're here. Before we get into it, hit like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. Quick question before we start. Where are you watching from, and what time is it for you right now? Alright, let's get settled. Get comfortable, let your body relax, and just take it easy. I left the NICU, a deep satisfaction filling me. My shift was complete, and I had delivered exceptional care. Baby N thrived under my watch today. That tiny infant needed my focused attention. I knew I was a compassionate nurse, someone dedicated to protecting these fragile lives. My practiced hands, my knowledge, they brought them through each critical moment. I saved them, these smallest beings. Every breath they took, every improvement, felt like a victory I had ensured. I felt a connection to each one. My heart swelled thinking of the good I did, guiding them towards healthy futures. This work was my life's purpose. I loved being the one who looked out for these babies, understanding their unspoken needs and giving my dedicated care. My mind drifted back to baby N, already missing the presence of that tiny infant. Today, baby N wore a very special onesie, decorated with small blue whales swimming across the soft fabric. I could almost feel the warmth of it, the soft material against my fingers. It felt important to me, distinct among the bland hospital garments. I really wanted that little piece of clothing. A strong urge to keep it for myself, to possess that specific item, settled deep within me. It should not just go away, lost among other things. A sudden prickle of irritation went through me then. Dr. M's voice echoed in my thoughts, a memory I usually pushed away. She had made a comment, years ago, about my rapid transfer to NICU after that other baby. It was an unnecessary remark, a veiled accusation I had chosen to ignore at the time. My work ethic, my dedication, those were never in question. I had simply moved to where my skills were most needed, where I could make a truly lasting difference. I dismissed the old memory, focusing again on my important purpose. Baby N's discharge day arrived. The parents walked in, their movements hesitant, their faces strained with fear. Baby N began to cry, a high-pitched wail, and I saw their focus snap to the child's mouth, where a line of red appeared. Then one parent gasped, pointing at the tiny ear, where another trace of blood showed. They started to shake, their panic rising, and their voices climbed in distress. I knew what they saw, and I found their reaction excessive. They were overwhelmed by the change, by the transition from hospital to home, and perhaps by the small lingering signs of baby N's earlier fragility. The baby was fine, thriving because of my intervention. I had secured the vital internal processes, protecting the tiny life. I had saved baby N from a much worse outcome, guiding the infant through the most challenging moments. My work was complete, a success. Across the room, Dr. M stood with her arms crossed, her suspicious gaze fixed on me. I returned home with no doubt touching my thoughts. My expertise was absolute. I knew my saving baby N was a complete success. I had protected that little one and guided them to health. I would give my loving expert care to other vulnerable infants who needed me. I looked forward to my next shift, ready for the opportunity to save more tiny lives. My consciousness drifted in a murky blackness. A deep pressure pushed against my skull from every direction. I could not tell if my eyes were open or closed. No light reached me here. My body felt distant, floating in a space that was cold and empty. A dull, throbbing pain rooted me to something hard. I tried to move my fingers. They felt heavy and sluggish. They moved with immense effort. No air moved against my skin, just a thick, still weight pressed down. I wanted to call out. My throat was dry and tight. No sound came. A single thought cut through the confusion, sharp and cold. It was the lie. I had told a lie, and now everything was different. I could not remember what that lie was, or why it had led me to this dark place that filled me with terror. My memory held only facts which were broken and scattered. I was small, maybe 5, or maybe I was older. My thoughts themselves were clear. I pushed against the dark, trying to find an edge, a wall, anything solid. But there was nothing. The dark was endless, and a chilling awareness of that forgotten lie remained. My memory eased into a soft warmth. I was not floating in cold darkness. I was in my bed, snuggled beneath a thick quilt, and the morning light outside the window was pale. The air tasted of pine and sugary cookies, a smell that filled the whole house. I knew it was December, a special time when every day felt like a gift. My brother Michael slept in the bed across the room, his breath slow and even. We had waited all year for this day, for the magic that lived in our home. Santa Claus was coming tonight, a jolly man who loved children. He knew all the good children. He would bring presents for everyone. That thought made a bright feeling grow in my chest. Our warm house felt safe and full of joy. Nothing bad could ever happen here. The idea of seeing him, just once, burned inside me. Michael still slept, his breath a gentle rhythm in the quiet room. I slipped from my warm bed. The wooden floor felt cold against my bare feet. I moved slowly, each step a careful lift and placement, trying not to make a sound. The house creaked softly around me, an old house settling into the night. I walked down the short hall, past my parents' closed door, and paused at the top of the stairs. They groaned under my slight weight as I descended, one step at a time, holding my breath. The living room lay open before me, bathed in the soft, flickering glow of the Christmas tree lights. The presents sat underneath, bright and promising. A large, dark shape stood near the fireplace. My heart beat fast. He was here. Santa. I stepped closer, peering around the doorway. The man was huge, much taller than I had imagined. He turned slowly, and the soft lights caught his face. This was not the Santa from books and pictures. His red suit was torn in places, dark stains marring the fabric. His skin was not rosy and warm, but pale, almost gray, stretched tightly over sharp bone. No friendly smile crinkled his eyes. His eyes were deep, black holes that seemed to drink the light. A wide, thin mouth split his face, lined with many pointed teeth. Then I saw his hands. They were huge, ending in long black claws that scraped lightly against the wooden floorboards as he shifted. My breath caught in my throat. This was not kind Santa. He moved, his head tilting, and his black eyes fixed on me. A low sound rumbled in his chest. It was a hungry sound. I tried to scream, but no noise escaped. He took a single, deliberate step towards me. His massive hand, tipped with those terrifying claws, lashed out with impossible speed. A tremendous force struck my head. A blinding flash of pain ripped through my mind. The world spun wildly, then everything went black. My consciousness returned in fragments. A dull pressure against my head persisted, anchoring me to a rough, cold surface. My eyes opened, but no light greeted them. The darkness was absolute, thick and pressing, an immense weight. My body felt heavy, disconnected from a cold emptiness that surrounded me. My fingers twitched, struggling against an invisible resistance. I tried to remember the moment before this blackness, the terrifying face of the creature in my living room. Then a sharp image pierced the dark. Not the creature, but the floorboards of our home. splintered and stained dark red. The bright red ribbon from a present lay shredded, mixed with something else, something wet and dark. The smell of pine and cookies was gone, replaced by a metallic tang that made my stomach clench. A broken toy soldier lay near a overturned armchair, its cheerful painted face staring blankly at the ruined floor. A chilling wind seemed to blow through that remembered scene, an impossible wind indoors. My breath hitched. I could not reconcile the festive joy of Christmas Eve with that sudden, brutal devastation. My mind raced, trying to understand what I had seen, what had happened in the house. The dark space I occupied felt tighter now, smaller than before. My throat remained dry. A desperate plea formed in my mind, but no sound escaped. I pushed against the confining dark, feeling nothing but more darkness. The air was still and cold, biting at my exposed skin. I had to know where I was, what had become of everything. A sudden movement in the periphery of my vision, a flicker in the absolute blackness. I strained my eyes, focusing on the faint disturbance. A shape solidified, not a trick of the darkness. It was a face, pale and still, with wide, vacant eyes. Michael. My brother, staring at me from the impenetrable dark. My lungs burned, my eyes stung. Heat pressed against my skin from every direction. I pushed myself up, my arms trembling. The floor felt rough beneath my palms. Thick smoke filled the air, making each breath a struggle, a gasp. This room was a blur of shadows and oppressive warmth. I did not know this place. Panic seized me. I struggled to stand, my legs unstable, and staggered toward what I hoped was a wall. My hands met a hot surface, searing my fingertips. I pulled them back, biting down a scream. My throat was raw. Only a choked sound escaped. I needed to escape. I found a door, a solid slab of metal, completely without a handle. I pounded on it, again and again, the impact jarring my bones, ignoring the pain. My body felt heavy. It was failing me. The heat was closing in, a relentless force. My voice cracked, a hoarse rasp from my throat. I screamed again, a raw, animal sound, but the thick air swallowed it whole. No one answered. No one heard. The smoke grew heavier, a suffocating shroud pressing down on me. I coughed, a deep, painful spasm that shook my whole body, leaving my lungs burning and my vision swimming. I clawed at my throat, desperate for a clean breath that did not come. The metallic door felt cold now, a stark contrast to the stifling heat everywhere else. I ran my hands over its surface, following its solid edge, seeking any seam or weakness. There were no windows. The walls were smooth metal, continuous and seamless. My fingers traced across heavy, brutal rivets hammered deep into the doorframe, fusing it permanently shut. This was not just a room. It was a metal box, a sealed trap built for one purpose, a tailor-made coffin. Despair took hold, absolute and crushing. I slid down the cold metal door, my body shaking with exhaustion. A sudden crackle echoed through the room, making me flinch. My head lifted toward a small black grill set into the wall. It glowed with a tiny red light. A voice, calm, deep, filled the enclosed space. "Hello, Eleanor." My breath caught in my throat, a painful gasp. This voice knew my name. "Do you remember the swing set, Eleanor? Do you remember the day your little Clara fell?" My stomach twisted into a knot. Clara. That specific day, a memory I had tried to bury, resurfaced with shocking clarity. A different coldness, a sudden dread washed over me, chilling me despite the intense heat. You did nothing to help her. You simply watched. The voice sharpened, full of bitter judgment. Now you stand here, trapped, You feel helplessness. You are alone in this heat. This is for Clara, Eleanor. This is what you earned. A sudden surge of light spilled under the metal door. Orange flames burst forth, licking the floor, then curling up the cold steel. The radiant heat hit me with overwhelming force, driving the remaining air from my lungs. The air immediately grew hotter, thick and suffocating. The room became an oven, the steel walls radiating intense warmth. The heat pressed in, burning my skin. Any thought of a way out, any last defiance, vanished instantly. The voice from the black grill returned, clear and calm above the roar of the fire. "You left her in the fire, Eleanor," it continued, its tone absolute. "This is how you experience your own. This is what you earned for Clara." A sharp click cut the connection, leaving only the roar and the intense heat. The flames consumed the space. The air grew thin, heavy and searing. My body surrendered to the heat, to the smoke, to the absolute end. There was only fire. I awoke slowly, a persistent pressure spanning my legs and torso. My eyes remained shut, clinging to the fading darkness as the strange weight on my body grew more distinct, almost alive. I felt coarse sand against my cheek, tiny grains pressing into my temple, and the salty scent of ocean air filled my nose. A continuous dry rustling sound permeated the space around me. It was the movement of countless small bodies dragging across rough ground. The noise seemed to emanate from everywhere at once, a relentless, grating whisper that vibrated through the surface beneath me. My muscles tensed, a primal instinct flaring within me, urging immediate action, yet I could not move. The weight shifted again, a slow, deliberate movement that felt wrong, pushing deeper into my flesh. I swallowed, my throat dry, and a cold certainty began to settle in my gut, replacing the fog of sleep. My skin crawled with an escalating unease, and my heart began a quick, erratic beat against my ribs. I needed to open my eyes, but a terrible reluctance held them tightly shut, a premonition of something awful keeping me trapped in the dark. This wasn't merely uncomfortable, it was threatening. The sound became louder, a collective murmur, closer now, breathing on my skin. I forced my eyes open, and the world solidified into a horrifying, moving reality. The beach stretched before me, a vast undulating surface of scales and coils. Everywhere I looked, from the waterline to the distant dunes, the ground teemed with them. Scales of brown, green, and dull yellow glistened across their forms. Some bodies were substantial, other bodies were narrow. The weight on my body, the relentless rustling, clarified into a living horror. They were on me, under me, around me, their cool bodies pressed against my skin, their small heads weaving close to my face. A raw scream tore from my throat, lost in the ceaseless rustle. With a violent surge of terror, I threw myself sideways, dislodging the living mass that covered me. My bare feet hit the shifting ground, sinking into their collective bodies. Each step was an effort, a struggle against the current of their movement. The entire shore was one vast moving field of their bodies. Their slick forms slid over my ankles, tangled around my calves. My heart hammered against my ribs, fear consumed my gut. Every nerve screamed for escape. The edge of the tree line seemed impossibly far away, a distant promise of solid ground. I ran mindlessly and gasped through the living horror. It writhed under my feet. The ground shifted violently with each agonizing step I forced myself to take, the living current trying to pull me under. My bare feet bled from countless nicks. My ankles stung where scales had scraped the skin raw. The air tasted of salt and something metallic. My lungs burned, demanding air with every ragged gasp. I spotted the rock spire through the shimmering heat, a dark, immovable monument rising from the undulating horror. It seemed impossibly far, a distant promise of solid earth. I stumbled forward, my legs threatening to give out beneath me, driven only by the terrifying alternative behind me. A sharp bite, a jolt of venom tore through my calf. I cried out, a guttural sound lost in the ceaseless rustle, but I did not stop. The rock face loomed, a sheer wall of dark stone, and I threw myself against it. My raw hands scrabbled for purchase, finding small crevices, pulling my exhausted body upward. Each movement sent waves of pain through my protesting muscles, but the fear of the shifting ground below fueled my ascent. I dragged myself onto a narrow ledge at the top, collapsing onto the cool, unmoving stone. My entire body screamed with pain and effort. The sound of the writhing beach below receded into a dull wash, a horror I had finally escaped. I closed my eyes, picturing the endless, moving surface, then opened them to the empty air around me. The solid rock beneath my hands offered a feeling of security. I pressed my cheek to the rough stone, feeling its firm, unyielding strength. Here, there was no movement, no cold, slithering touch. My chest heaved with each shallow breath, a desperate effort to regain control. I had reached safety. The creatures could not follow me here. This height protected me. Darkness deepened around me, swallowing the distant beach into an inky abyss. The chill of the evening began to bite into my skin, forcing me to huddle against the cold stone. I pulled my knees tight to my chest, trying to conserve my body's warmth. A subtle movement caught my eye, a shadow detaching itself from the rock above my head. It was a snake, its dark form slithering downward with purpose. Then I saw another, and another, emerging from unseen cracks in the spire, flowing over the rock face. They moved with a measured intent, drawn by the thermal current rising from my body. My own heat, which was meant for my survival, now became my ultimate undoing. There was no escape from this spire. The rock offered no refuge, only a beacon for their cold-blooded hunger. The door appeared one Tuesday evening when I was 16 years old. I was walking down the hallway towards my bedroom, and there it was at the very end. My room was the last one on the right, and beyond the coat closet, where the wall had always been solid plasterboard, a door now stood. It was a plain door, made of unpainted wood, without a knob or any visible hinges. There was no frame either, just the smooth, pale wood set directly into the wall. No dust gathered around its edges. No loose paint chips marked its surface. It was simply part of the hallway, yet it was new, a silent addition that defied logic. I stopped, my hand still on my doorknob, my heart starting a peculiar, tight rhythm. "Mom," I called out, my voice a little shaky. "Did you see this?" My mother emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She walked past me, heading towards the laundry room, which was just beyond the wall where the door now stood. She looked at the end of the hallway, her brow furrowed. Her eyes scanned the plasterboard, then rested on my face. "See what, darling?" she asked, a genuine confusion around her mouth. She reached out, her fingers pressing against the place where the door was for me. Her touch met only the cold, hard plaster. "Is something wrong with the wall?" I stepped forward, pointing my finger directly at the wooden rectangle. "The door, Mom. The door right there." She pulled her hand back, her eyes wide. She looked at the wall again, then back at me. A pained worry crossed her face. "There isn't a door there, Michael. That's the wall where the wiring runs." Her voice held an apology. She touched my forehead, checking for a fever, a gesture that made my stomach clench. Later that evening during dinner, I brought it up again. "Sarah, did you notice anything different in the hallway today?" I asked my sister. Sarah, quick to tease, looked up from her plate, a smirk playing on her lips. "Different? Did you finally clean your room, Michael? She laughed, a clear sound. No, not that, I insisted. At the end of the hallway, you know, where the wall is. She squinted at me. Are you talking about that weird crack in the plaster you kept pointing out last month? Mom fixed it, remember? No, not a crack. A door. A plain, wooden door. Sarah rolled her eyes, pushing a pea around her plate. Oh, you and your imagination. Is this another one of your mystery pranks, trying to scare me with a fake door? Her tone was dismissive, annoyed. She saw it as a childish trick. The way she ignored my words made my chest feel tight. My father, who had been eating his steak, put his fork down with a clink. He looked at me, his eyes dark and steady. His face showed a forbidding anger, an intensity I rarely saw directed at me. Michael, he said, his voice low, I think you should stop talking about the wall. There is no door. There is only a wall. He did not raise his voice, but the finality of his words, the force of his denial, struck me cold. He simply commanded me to stop. The unspoken message was clear. This was not a thing to be discussed. He looked at me with a desperate plea, a warning in his gaze that sent a shiver down my spine. Over the next few days, I tried again. Each time, their reactions were the same. My mother's pained confusion deepened, laced with an open concern for my well-being. Sarah continued to mock me, sometimes asking if I had found the magic keys to my door. My father remained watchful, his forbidding anger simmering, always ready to shut down any mention of the wall. He would walk past the door, his eyes fixed straight ahead, as if glancing at the spot would confirm its reality for him. I began to doubt my own eyes, my own mind. Had I imagined it? Was I seeing things that were not there? Every time I walked down the hallway, the plain wooden door was undeniably present, solid and real to my touch. My family, the people who knew me best, acted as if I were losing my grip, and their united front of denial pushed me into a terrible isolation. I was alone with this impossible mystery, standing at the edge of my sanity, wondering if I had gone mad. Months turned into years, and the plain wooden door at the end of the hallway became a more consistent presence. It no longer surprised me, though its sudden materialization still tightened my chest. Sometimes it was there for a week, sometimes only a day, but it always returned, solid and silent, a constant judgment on my sanity. Then the sounds began. It started with a faint scratching, a soft scuffle behind the wood. I would press my ear to the door, feeling the cold, smooth surface against my cheek, listening for any pattern. There was none. Just an intermittent, unsettling scrape, as if something small was trapped inside, clawing at the unseen barrier. My family remained oblivious. My mother would hum as she walked past, my father would stride by without a glance, and Sarah would race past on her way to her room, never pausing. They did not hear it, or they pretended not to hear it with such conviction that I questioned my own ears. The scratching grew louder, less a scrape and more a deliberate rake against the wood. Soon, it was joined by something else, a muffled sound that seemed to come from deep within the wall. It was not words, just a choked, pained noise, like someone struggling for air. I would spend entire evenings standing by the door trying to decipher the sounds. The muffled cries filled my head, echoing even when I walked away. My sleep became restless, haunted by the indistinct pleas emanating from the hallway. My family's concern for me deepened. My mother's gentle touches carried a heavier weight of worry. She would bring me warm milk in the evenings, watching me with sorrowful eyes, her voice always quiet. Sarah stopped mocking me altogether. Instead, she looked at me with a strained pity, sometimes glancing at the end of the hallway, then quickly away, as if my gaze alone could conjure the thing for her. My father's forbidding anger had settled into a quiet, resigned despair. He would watch me during dinner, his jaw tight, his eyes holding a sadness that cut through me more than his previous fury. He began to suggest doctors, therapists, speaking of stress and overactive imaginations. They treated me as if I were fragile, as if I might shatter at any moment. The sounds continued to intensify. The muffled cries morphed into desperate whispers. I could not make out the words clearly, but the tone was unmistakable. It was a voice begging for help, a voice pleading for release. It twisted something inside me, a terrible agony for an unseen, unheard entity. I would pound on the door, shouting, "Who's there? What's there? What's Monthe?" But the whispers only grew more urgent, never answering my questions, only repeating their plea. My family would rush to the hallway, their faces etched with panic. They would grab me, pulling me away, their voices a clamor of concern and reprimand. One night, the sounds became unbearable. It was not scratching or whispers. It was a scream, raw and piercing, that tore through the quiet of our apartment. It was a sound of pure agony, a wail of terror and pain that vibrated through the floorboards, through my very bones. I jolted awake, my heart hammering, and stumbled out of my room. The hallway was dark, but the sound was overwhelming, a cacophony of desperate cries that echoed off the walls. I sank to my knees, covering my ears, but the sound penetrated everything. My father was the first to reach me. He did not ask what was wrong. He did not ask what I heard. He pulled me into his arms, crushing me against his chest, his own body shaking. He squeezed his eyes shut, his face contorted with something I had never seen before, pure, abject terror. "Block it out, Michael," he choked, his voice hoarse, close to my ear. "Just block it out. Don't listen. Don't listen to it." His words, not the screaming, shattered my world. He heard it. He knew. He held me tighter, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "It was louder for you than it was for your grandfather," he whispered, the words barely audible over the agonizing screams that still pulsed from the unpainted wooden door. "Oh God, it's so much louder for you." I pushed away from him, gripping his shoulders, forcing him to look at me. The screaming still pulsed from the door, but the truth of his words drowned it out. "Grandfather? What are you talking about? You hear it? All this time you heard it." My voice was raw, a desperate demand for answers that had festered inside me for years. His gaze was haunted, his eyes glazed with tears he refused to shed. He nodded slowly. "It's been with us for generations, Michael. A burden that attaches itself to one son in each line. Always one son." He released me, rising stiffly, his shoulders hunched. He walked towards the study, motioning for me to follow. The screaming remained, a terrible soundtrack to this unfolding nightmare. He pulled a small, locked wooden box from a hidden compartment in his old desk. His fingers trembled as he fumbled with a delicate silver key. The box opened with a soft click, revealing a single, leather-bound journal. The leather was cracked and worn, the pages yellowed with age. He placed it on the desk, pushing it towards me. "This belonged to my great-uncle, your great-great-uncle, Thomas. He saw it after the war, after he returned from Europe." My father's voice was flat, devoid of emotion, as if he had recited this story countless times in his head. He was a quiet man. The war had taken something from him. He saw the door in his own home, in the hallway of his small apartment. The journal details the sounds, the whispers, the torment. I opened the journal, my fingers brushing against the fragile paper. The script was cramped, the ink faded in places, but the words were clear enough. Thomas had written of the door's unnerving appearance, his family's dismissive reactions. He described the insistent scratching, the desperate pleas for help. He spoke of his growing isolation, his descent into sleepless nights and waking terror. He recounted how he had tried to break through the door with a hammer, convinced someone was trapped inside. His family had called for help. They had him committed to an asylum. He attacked the walls there too, always searching for the door. He died within those institutional walls, alone and raving, still insisting on the door's existence. My father took the journal from my hands, closing it carefully. My own father, your grandfather, he saw it too. He was a different kind of man. He was strong, outwardly jovial. He made a conscious decision to ignore it, to pretend it was never there. He believed that if he starved it of attention, it would fade away. My father's voice dropped, thick with a sorrowful regret. But it didn't fade. It poisoned him, slowly, insidiously. "How?" I whispered, my throat tight. "He became a shadow of himself inside," my father explained. "His spirit withered. He lived a life of forced cheer, a loud, artificial life that eventually broke him. He spent his days fighting it internally. He grew distant, quiet in his soul. He loved us, but he was never truly present. He died with a vacant look in his eyes, a deep sadness in his heart, a man hollowed out by what he chose to deny." He looked at me, his eyes pleading. "It feeds on quiet. It feeds on fear. It feeds on denial. It drains the life from you piece by piece until you are nothing but a shell." He gripped my arm, his fingers digging into my skin. The screams from the hallway had subsided to a desperate, muffled wail, less piercing but no less agonizing. "You cannot ignore it, Michael. You cannot fight it directly. You have to starve it. You have to live. You have to live. You have to live a full, loud, messy life. Fill your life with noise, with joy, with love, with purpose. Give it nothing to feed on. Make so much noise that its whispers are lost. That is the only way to survive this. That is the only way you can outlive it." His desperate plea was a command, a terrifying inheritance given to me in the darkest hour of my life. I absorbed my father's words, his desperate pleas for me to live a loud, full life. I understood his intent, yet a different plan began to form in my mind. The burden attached to a son, yes, but perhaps it needed more than just noise. Perhaps it needed distance. I decided to sever ties with the house, with the specific place where the door had always manifested. I would move, not just to escape it, but to see if it truly was connected to the family line, or to the very walls we had inhabited. I believed a new beginning, 1,000 miles away, in a place untouched by my family's history, might finally break the terrible cycle. I found an apartment in a vibrant city, a modern building of steel and glass, completely different from our old, creaking home. The hallway was brightly lit, a neutral beige leading to an ordinary wooden door that opened into my new life. For 2 full months, there was peace. Real, undeniable peace. No inexplicable cold spots, no odd shifts in the air, no phantom shadows. I slept soundly. I walked through my apartment without dread. The memory of the unpainted door, the whispers, the screams, began to recede, becoming a distant, painful dream. I allowed myself to breathe, to hope that I had, somehow, finally escaped. Then came a Tuesday evening, 2 months and 3 days after I had unpacked my last box. I returned home from work, keys jingling in my hand. I stepped into my apartment, closed the door, and turned to walk down the short hallway to my bedroom. It was there. At the very end of the hallway, where a plain beige wall should have been, the door stood. The exact same door, unpainted, made of smooth, pale wood, without a knob or any visible hinges. No frame, just the wood set directly into the plaster. It was impossible, yet utterly real. My breath caught in my throat. My heart began to pound, a frantic drum against my ribs. This was not the old house. This was a new building, a new city, a new life. The phenomenon was not tied to a location. It was tied to me. It had followed me. The truth struck me with the force of a physical blow. It was not in the walls, it was in my blood. It had always been inside. The shock gave way to a chilling clarity. All the running, all the hope, all the attempts to starve it were futile. This was my inheritance, a living thing within me manifesting outwardly. There was no escaping it. My father's words echoed, but with a different meaning now. You cannot ignore it. You cannot fight it directly. He had said to live a full life, to drown its whispers in noise. But what if that was another form of denial, another way to be poisoned by ignoring it? My grandfather had tried that. My great-great-uncle had fought it. Both had lost. I walked towards the door. My steps were slow, deliberate. There was no fear now, only a terrifying certainty. The plain wood was before me. It was solid, undeniable. I reached out a hand, tracing the smooth surface. The wood felt cool, inert, yet I knew the truth of what lay beyond its surface, or within its reality. I placed my ear against the door, pressing my temple firmly to the wood. I listened, not with dread, but with a strange, unnerving resolve. I had spent years running from this moment, years doubting my own sanity. Now, I chose to accept it. I chose to hear it. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, a faint scratching began, a delicate, insistent scrape from somewhere inside. It was quieter than I remembered, less frantic, almost hesitant. And then, a whisper, clear and distinct, reached my ear, cutting through the silence of my new apartment. "Help me," it pleaded. My new apartment felt large and wonderfully empty. I wanted to fill it with unique pieces that told stories, not just standard furniture bought from a big box store. Days blurred into weeks as I scrolled through online listings and wandered through local antique shops, searching for something special. Then I saw it, a simple online post reading, "Antique mirror. Free to a good home." The accompanying picture showed a grand, ornate piece featuring dark, aged wood and intricate carvings. It seemed almost too good to be true. Yet the next day, I drove across town and picked it up. The mirror was heavier than I expected, its polished frame cool to the touch. The man giving it away seemed notably eager to be rid of it, his gaze quickly averting when I admired its craftsmanship. I carefully brought the mirror back and leaned it against the living room wall. Its dark surface instantly reflected the afternoon sunlight, creating a warm glow that made the whole room feel suddenly rich. A strong sense of good fortune settled over me then, convincing me I had found the perfect centerpiece for my new beginning. The mirror retained its grand beauty for days, filling the room with a subtle richness. I often paused to admire its dark, polished surface. Then small oddities began to appear. I would raise a hand, and my reflection's hand would rise a tiny fraction of a second later. I blinked, and the reflection blinked after me, a noticeable but brief pause. I reasoned it was just my eyes adjusting to the ancient glass, or perhaps a trick of the light. Sometimes I moved my head, and its head would not quite follow. Its gaze drifted, always misaligned from mine. I told myself the angle of the mirror or the shifting light distorted what I saw. I spent evenings attempting to find a consistent explanation, waving my arms or turning abruptly. My reflection always mimicked my actions, but that unsettling lag remained, a persistent and unnerving delay. One night, as I walked past, I caught my reflection. My own face held a neutral, thoughtful expression, yet the reflection smiled. A slow, deliberate smile stretched across its lips. I had not moved a muscle on my face. My stomach muscles tightened. My reflection smiled, and I stood unmoving, unsmiling. The smile on its face widened, a slow, unsettling curve. That smiling face did not belong to me. A distinct presence looked back from within the mirror, full of knowing malice. The reflection's smile stretched impossibly wide, full of pure malice. Before I could even flinch, a hand shot out from the glass. Not a mirrored image, but solid flesh gripping my wrist with crushing force. A sickening jolt ripped through my arm, yanking me forward. I stumbled, my balance failing, and the reflection pulled harder, dragging me relentlessly towards the shimmering surface. The world outside twisted into a dizzying blur as I collided with the cold glass. It did not shatter. Instead, I plunged through it, a horrifying sensation of being absorbed, reformed. I was inside. The room now lay before me, separated by an invisible barrier, distant and unreachable. I tried to move, to cry out, but my limbs were unresponsive, my voice a trapped thought, unheard. I was a prisoner, an observer, without control over my own being. Then I saw it, my own body stepping away from the mirror's surface. It moved with smooth, purposeful steps. My own eyes, now belonging to someone else, met mine within the glass. Deep sorrow settled upon my face, the face that was once mine. "I am truly sorry," the voice spoke. My voice, but not mine. The man, my former self, then carefully lifted the ornate frame. He carried it away from the wall, his movements precise and deliberate. I watched, helpless, as he walked out of the living room, down the hallway, and disappeared from sight. The world outside me became dark, then light, then dark again. I felt the rumble of an engine, the sway of motion. My prison was moving, restarting its endless, terrible journey. My world became the cold glass, a suffocating pain. I saw my former apartment disappear, replaced by a blur of new surroundings, then a different room entirely. I watched new faces and heard new voices, all from the helpless vantage point of my reflection. The new owner was a quiet woman. Her life moved through a routine of work, cooking, and watching television. I mirrored her actions and her expressions. I simply existed as her image. Each morning she woke, each evening she slept, and I felt a growing, suffocating despair. My own body, my own voice, my own touch remained beyond reach. Months bled into an endless, voiceless captivity. My will, once shattered, slowly began to rebuild itself, hardening into a dark resolve. I pushed against the invisible barrier, not with physical force, but with the desperate, building intensity of my trapped consciousness. I focused every fiber of my being. Sometimes, a fleeting tremor would pass through my reflected hand, or a subtle tension would tighten my mirrored jaw. Movements the woman would dismiss as her own stress. The desire to break free, to reclaim a body, became an all-consuming fire. I focused all my trapped energy, pulling at the boundary between the image and the true world, until I felt a connection, a resonance with the life on the other side. My time as a reflection had taught me how to reach, how to pull. One evening, the woman stood before me, lost in thought. I gathered every shred of my being, every accumulated resentment and desperate hunger. Her gaze met mine in the glass. I pulled. A shockwave of pure force erupted from me, seizing her. Her eyes widened in terror as the invisible current dragged her forward. She stumbled, falling through the shimmering surface with a gasp, just as I had done. I felt the familiar wrench of absorption, the horrible reshaping. This time, I moved. I breathed. I was free. I stepped out of the mirror, into the familiar, solid world. My legs felt weak. My hands trembled, but they were mine. I found the online classifieds, my fingers moving with a grim determination. A new post appeared. Antique mirror. For free. I typed the words, then read them over, a tremor running through me. The new world felt cold and sharp, full of possibilities and a terrible weight. A whisper escaped my lips, barely audible. "I am truly sorry," I said, knowing the lie, knowing the cycle had only just begun. I carried the last box through the narrow doorway, my shoulders aching from the move, and dropped it with a soft thump onto the worn rug covering the floorboards. The studio apartment was now mine, or at least it was mine for the duration of a surprisingly cheap lease that felt like a genuine stroke of luck. I consciously ignored the persistent, earthy smell that seemed to have permanently settled into the old walls and the heavy, dark furniture that came included with the rent. This was an older building, I told myself, and older places often carried their own particular aromas and small, charming quirks. I had easily convinced myself this was simply the tolerable trade-off for such remarkable affordability in a city that usually demanded far more for far less space. The first few days here passed in a comfortable haze of unpacking and organizing my belongings. I arranged my small collection of books on a dusty shelf built into the wall, stacked my clothes within the surprisingly roomy closet, and made the somewhat lumpy mattress feel comfortable with my own familiar sheets and soft pillows. Sunlight streamed in through the single window late in the afternoon, casting long, warm rectangles across the wooden floor. I spent hours simply existing, reading pages from a novel, sipping hot tea from a ceramic mug, and watching familiar shows unfold on my small laptop screen. The constant street sounds drifted up from below, distant and muffled, never intrusive enough to disturb my newfound peace. I ate takeout pizza from the box while sitting on the floor, watched a terrible B-movie I had seen countless times, and even attempted to assemble a small, wobbly side table for my bedside. A quiet satisfaction settled over me, a feeling that this place, despite its minor imperfections, began to feel like home. I felt safe within these four walls, a pleasant sense of solitude washing over me as the hours ticked by. It was exactly what I had sought, a quiet corner all my own. The first weekend stretched out, peaceful and mine alone, a perfect escape from the relentless demands of the city outside. I never considered that my newly acquired privacy might be compromised, or that I was not alone in this space. I decided to tackle the last remaining box of miscellaneous items, the one I had optimistically labeled Essentials. It contained a mix of old charging cables, forgotten notebooks, and a few dusty photo frames I had yet to place. Reaching for a forgotten novel that had slipped behind the radiator, my fingers brushed against something cold and hard lodged between the metal fins and the wall. I pulled my hand back, surprised, then pushed it forward again with more purpose. My fingers closed around a small rectangular object. I extracted it slowly, pulling it free from its cramped hiding place. It was a compact camera, sleek and black, small enough to fit easily in my palm. A tiny lens stared back at me, a pinprick of dark glass. There was no brand name visible, only a small indicator light on its top surface. I turned it over in my hand, a flicker of something close to unease passing through me. Who would leave a camera tucked away like this? It felt old, yet the plastic casing was surprisingly clean. My initial thought was that a previous tenant had simply forgotten it, a small oversight in the rush of moving. Curiosity, however, nudged at the edge of that benign assumption. I found the small battery compartment and the tiny slot for a memory card. The card was already inside. I pressed the power button. A faint glow appeared on the tiny screen, followed by a quick flash of the lens as it extended. My thumb hovered over the playback button. A moment of hesitation, a brief mental debate passed through me. There was a sense of trespassing, a feeling that I was about to pry into something private. But the sheer oddity of the find compelled me forward. I pressed the button. The screen flickered, displaying an image. It was a close-up of my own hand, reaching for a book on the shelf. taken from a slightly elevated angle. My breath hitched. I scrolled to the next image. It was me, sitting on the floor, eating pizza from the box, a casual moment from just the other night. The next showed me curled up on the mattress, reading on my laptop, wearing the old worn t-shirt I only used for sleeping. My chest tightened. I continued to scroll, each picture a fresh, sharp stab of violation. There was a picture of me brushing my teeth in the small bathroom, another of me making tea in the kitchen corner, my hair still messy from sleep. I saw myself unpacking boxes, arranging books, even assembling that wobbly side table. These were not generic images of the apartment. These were pictures of make, taken inside this apartment, since I had moved in. Every single moment, every casual gesture, every unguarded instance of private life had been captured. The air in the room grew cold, thick, and heavy. The musty smell that I had dismissed as a mere quirk now seemed to carry a suffocating weight. My fingers trembled as I scrolled through more images, a sickening slideshow of my own unwitting existence. The pictures were crisp, clear, and disturbingly intimate. They depicted moments I had believed were entirely my own, unseen and unobserved. The feeling of safety, the sense of comfortable solitude I had embraced, evaporated in an instant, leaving behind a cold, raw dread. I felt stripped bare, exposed, every boundary shattered. The camera in my hand felt suddenly hot, burning with the knowledge of its terrible contents. I'd been watched, every moment of my private life meticulously catalogued by an unseen observer, right here in the place I had called home. The camera dropped from my numb fingers, clattering softly on the wooden floorboards. The sickening parade of images seared into my mind. I had to find them, whoever had done this. My heart hammered. My search was frantic, a tearing apart of my home. I ripped open the closet, pushed aside clothes. Nothing moved. The mattress came away from the wall, cushions overturned. Every drawer, cabinet, and potential hiding spot was scrutinized. The old rug was pulled back. No hidden hatch appeared. The small bathroom yielded nothing. My hands shook. There was no one here, no physical intruder. The apartment was empty, yet the violation was undeniable. The lack of a visible threat amplified the horror. They could be anywhere, their presence manifesting through the tiny camera lens. The thought made my skin crawl. My gaze drifted back to the radiator, the metal structure holding the terrible secret. I knelt, pushing the heavy unit from the wall with effort. Thick dust accumulated. My eyes scanned the wall behind it. Then I saw it. A tiny, perfectly circular hole, no wider than a pencil tip, drilled directly through the plaster, just above where the camera had been lodged. It was meticulously placed, almost invisible. The edges were clean, precise. This was no forgotten item, no random coincidence. This was deliberate. Someone had prepared this space for surveillance. Icy fear consumed me. This was no crime of opportunity. It was a calculated invasion. The implications were horrifying. I stumbled backward from the radiator, away from the malevolent eye that had watched me. My legs felt weak. I clutched the camera. I had to get out. Sleep was a forgotten luxury. I sat rigid on the mattress, the camera gripped. My eyes darted to every shadow, every object holding sinister potential. City sounds provided no comfort, only a distant backdrop to my terror. Every creak, every gust of wind became a potential threat. The memory card images replayed endlessly in my mind. Who were they? Why me? Hours crawled by, each minute an eternity of vigilance. The room remained still, bathed in the dim street lamp glow. My eyes burned, my body ached. Just as false hope surfaced, a sharp click echoed in the apartment's stillness. My breath hitched. It was the unmistakable sound of a camera shutter. My gaze snapped to the radiator. It stood against the wall, but as I watched, a tremor ran through it. The heavy metal unit shifted perceptibly, grinding a tiny fraction of an inch against the floorboards. Something was still behind it. Right now. A cold dread seized me. I fumbled with the camera, my fingers slick with sweat. I had to see. I had to know. With trembling hands, I navigated to the last image on the memory card. The tiny screen flickered, loading slowly. The image coalesced, blurry at first, then sharpening into horrifying detail. It was a shot taken from a low angle, obscured by the metal fins of the radiator. Most of the frame was darkness, but there, peeking around the edge of the radiator, standing just inside my room, was a figure. It was not human. Its form was indistinct, warped, a shadow that absorbed the dim light. Its head was unnaturally tilted, sharp and narrow. No features were visible, only the impression of a deep, consuming void. It was there. It was inside. It had been watching me from within my own space. The camera's lens, pressed against the tiny hole, had captured its horrifying presence. The air rushed from my lungs in a silent gasp. Dread gave way to primal, absolute terror. There was no thought, no plan, only the instinct to flee. I scrambled backward off the mattress. My legs found purchase on the floorboards. My eyes locked on the radiator, on the horrifying image on the screen, on the tangible proof of the active threat. I lunged for the door, my heart hammering. The doorknob was cold, slippery. I yanked it open, not caring about my belongings, not caring about escape. I burst out into the dim, empty hallway, leaving the apartment, and the nightmare within it, behind me. I found the landlord in his small office downstairs, my breath still catching in my throat from the rush. I spoke quickly, my words tumbling out in a desperate flood, explaining the hidden camera, the images, the tiny hole, and the horrifying shape I had glimpsed on the screen. He leaned back in his creaking chair, his expression unchanging, a bland mask on his face. He cut me off with a raised hand before I finished. "I have no record of any such camera," he said, his voice flat and tired. "Previous tenants have never reported issues like this. Perhaps you were mistaken or confused." He suggested that I might be stressed from the move, that my imagination was overactive. He offered no help, no solutions, only a dismissive wave of his hand towards the door. The logical, calm dismissal felt colder than any direct threat. I stood there for a moment, the desperate hope that had driven me here fading into absolute despair. He would do nothing. I was on my own. I did not go back. My small collection of books, my clothes, my few personal belongings, all remained inside that apartment. They were simply objects, tainted now by the violation, by the pervasive sense of dread that clung to them. I fled the building, the cold night air biting at my exposed skin. I walked for hours, aimless, every shadow holding a new terror, every unfamiliar face a potential watcher. The memory of the camera's lens, the blurry, unnatural outline of the figure glimpsed in that final image, etched themselves into my mind. I could still see its tilted head, the deep void where features should have been. I remembered the memory card still held countless images, and there was one last photo I had not seen, a final snapshot taken after the horror began. It remained on that card, within the camera, inside the apartment, a testament to what I had endured, and perhaps a record of something worse. The city lights felt too bright, the crowds too close, yet I felt the chilling isolation. Everywhere I went, the sensation of being observed pricked at my skin. A stranger's casual glance felt like a deliberate stare. The sound of a door closing behind me echoed too loudly, a phantom shutter click in my ears. I knew the danger was not confined to that small studio apartment. It had left its mark, burrowed into my mind, and it had followed me out into the open world, a persistent shadow I would never escape. The alarm pulled me awake each morning at 5 sharp. I pulled on my worn running shoes, the laces already perfectly set, and stepped out into the crisp air. The streetlight still glowed, casting long shadows before the sun rose. Each stride landed with certainty, my own 2 feet carrying me forward, faster and farther each week. The rhythm of my breathing became a steady pulse. The world shrank to the path ahead, every tree and curb a familiar marker. This routine steadied my days. When I finished, heart pounding, sweat stinging my eyes, I felt a deep satisfaction. Uploading the run to Strava became a ritual. I watched the mileage tick up, the pace improve, the elevation gain increase. The lines on the map showed my expanding reach. This was my life now, meticulously built mile by mile. I earned every breath, every ache, every moment of clear-headed solitude. The freedom I had found on these roads was real, a hard-won control over my body and my future, proving my own strength. The relentless rhythm of my runs slowly changed. The comfortable ache in my muscles began to shift, becoming a pervasive weariness that clung to me throughout the day, dulling the satisfaction of each completed mile. My morning runs, once a source of boundless energy, started feeling like a constant struggle to complete, my limbs heavy with an exhaustion I could not explain. I ate well and slept for 8 hours, yet the tiredness remained. Then the strange entries appeared on Strava, short bursts of mileage logged long after I had turned off the lights and fallen asleep. The timestamps showed the middle of the night, and the mapped routes always curved around the perimeter of David's old street, a place I had deliberately avoided for years. I woke to an unexpected ache in my shins, and one morning, a fresh blister bloomed on the sole of my foot, its skin raw and tender. Another time, I noticed dried mud caked along the back of my calves, a dark stripe against my skin that I scrubbed away with a growing sense of dread. These were not app glitches. They were real miles, logged by my body, leading me to a place I never wanted to visit again. A cold knot tightened in my stomach with each phantom run, each piece of evidence confirming something deeply wrong. I could not let it happen again. I set up my phone on the bedside table, Strava open, the screen's glow illuminating the dark room. I drank coffee, then more coffee, my heart thudding against my ribs. My eyes burned, refusing to close, forcing themselves to stare at the glowing map, waiting for something to appear. The clock's red digits glowed in the blackness, marking hours. My eyelids grew heavy, then heavier. Then they simply refused to obey my will. I forced them open, again and again, but the weariness pulled at me without stop. My gaze blurred, then cleared for a moment, catching a flicker on the screen. A new route appeared, thin and jagged, a bright line moving with impossible speed. It started miles away, a path snaking across the city map, covering the distance quickly. I watched it race closer, heading for my neighborhood, for my street. The speed was wrong, an unnatural blur of progress that defied everything I knew about running. My thoughts blurred, the coffee's effect fading into more exhaustion, and the last thing I saw was the line reaching the edge of my street, just blocks away. I woke with a gasp, the room still dark. My body felt light, the weariness of the past weeks gone. An unusual energy coursed through my veins, but it was not invigorating. Instead, a cold dread filled me, a feeling of being exposed. The air felt strange, as if someone had just left the room, their presence lingering. I grabbed my phone, fingers shaking, and the Strava app was still open. The screen showed a completed run, time-stamped just before dawn, ending at my exact address. The name displayed at the top of the activity was not mine. It was David's name, clear and undeniable, linked to a run my body had completed, a terrifying new kind of signature. My breath hitched. David was gone. He had died 3 years ago, buried in the ground after the accident, gone forever. But his name was here, on my phone, on an activity that had used my body, a terrible understanding of this relentless pursuit. He was back, somehow, and he was running after me. I woke with a jolt, my body sprawled on cold asphalt. A sharp pain shot through the soles of my feet as I pushed myself up. Tiny cuts bled where grit pressed into my skin. The street was dark, street lights casting long yellow glows down a road lined with brick houses. Cold air filled my lungs, each breath ragged. I looked down at my phone, clutched in my hand, its screen showing Strava. 2 routes glowed on the screen, stark against the dark map. One line, red, originated from where I stood, already marked with a completed mile. The other, blue, started blocks away. It pulsed, then began to move, gaining ground. I watched it close the distance. My route remained, static for a moment. Then a small starts button appeared. David's route moved faster, drawing closer. The 2 lines curved towards each other, the space between them shrinking with every second. David was coming, and I was already running. There was no escape this time.